What's up YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gasset Garage. In today's video, we're back working on my 2003 Bombardier DS650 Sport Quad right here. And in the last video of this project, we finished the full top end rebuild on this thing after I absolutely cooked the crap out of the top end at Mini Mayhem. It completely destroyed it. And it had no compression, it had bent valves, the cam was broken, the head was roasted. It was really bad. But in the last video, we finished rebuilding it and finally got this thing running again. And it actually runs a lot better than it did, and it starts a lot easier. So now that that's done, there's a few last minute things that I want to do to this thing before I sell it. Because I am going to be getting rid of this thing so I can buy a different four-wheeler, which I will talk about later in the video. But there's a few things that I want to do on this thing, including a manual radiator fan switch, and I'm also going to be installing a new muffler on this thing so it'll sound a little bit better and hopefully run a little bit better as well. And also I'm going to be trying to fix the front brakes on this thing because I've mentioned that I was going to do that in previous videos, but I just never really got around to it. So we are going to finally try and fix the front brakes in this video. And lastly, I'm also going to be installing some new coolant lines. And then after all that's done, then we can take this thing for a rip. And I'm super excited because it's going to have a little bit more horsepower with the high compression forged piston that we put in it. So stay tuned for that and enjoy the video. Okay guys, so since we are still waiting on the coolant hoses that I ordered to get here from eBay, we're gonna go ahead and start working on this thing by installing a new muffler on it. Because this old muffler right here, it looks good and it is the original OEM muffler, but there's nothing inside of it for whatever reason. I guess it just got disintegrated and the previous owner took it out for some reason. And it's been out since I got it. So this thing is really, really loud and it kind of doesn't sound that great. So we're gonna be replacing it with this new one from Amazon. And even though it is a cheaper muffler, I have used them before right here on the 1000 go-kart. And they actually do sound pretty darn good for a high performance 4-stroke engine. So I am going to need to cut it down here and add a little bit of extra tubing because this thing is slightly shorter than the original one, but I think we can make it work. So let's go ahead and get to work on this by cutting off the old one and start fabricating some new exhaust tubing for the new one. Guys, so we have our tube cut off of the old muffler right here, or the muffler cut off the tube, and I've got all of the rust cleaned off of this because once we are done with this, I am going to be painting this with a high heat black paint so it doesn't rust again. But under here, we can go ahead and start mocking this thing up. If I can get it in here, it's a little tricky. Yeah, about like that. I am probably gonna end up cutting it right here because if you look, there are a couple of fractures in this and it's pretty badly damaged around this bend right here. So I'll probably end up cutting it right there where my thumb is and just welding on a new piece of tubing from there. So I went out to AutoZone and bought this piece of exhaust tubing right here, and we're going to put it right in between here like this. Obviously I have to trim it down, but it's gonna go onto here, and I probably still need to make this a little bit more round, and I'm also gonna try and match that end up with it a little bit, and then it'll go to right here onto this slip-on piece, so this muffler will be removable. And I've kind of got the muffler mounted where I want it right here. And I also mounted the fender back right there because it was kind of falling off. So let's go ahead and get this thing fabricated up and weld it in there. So we've got this tube in here. It's not like attached yet, it's not welded. It's just kind of sitting in there, but it actually is lining up pretty darn well. So I think we can go ahead and tack this together. I still do have to clean up this joint a little bit to make it fit a little bit better, but we can go ahead and at least tack this side on to get our angle right. And I may actually just go ahead, now that I'm looking at this, and tack this on and then just cut a little pie cut piece to fill this little gap right here. And then we can go ahead and weld this thing together. Alright guys, so the exhaust on this four-wheeler is finally done, other than cleaning up the welds and painting it, which I will do when it's cooled off. But we have these springs right here to hold the muffler on. We've got this all tightened down right here, and I've got it kind of where I need it on the back. And I have to say, I think it looks pretty darn good. The pipe actually cleaned up a little bit better than I thought it would. I've also got it mounted right here, and I've got the springs on underneath there, as well as these springs right here, like I mentioned before, and this mount for the fender is also done. So I actually want to see what this thing sounds like with the new muffler. So let's start it up real quick. But I can't run it for very long, like I mentioned in the last video, because we don't yet have our coolant lines on, so we don't have any coolant, so I can't run it for more than like 30 seconds. All right, so I'll throw a clip in right here of what this thing sounded like with the old muffler when we started it up in the last video. So as you can see, it has this like hollow rattling sound to it that I don't really like. And I want it to have like a nice deep, thumpy, throaty sound like most sport quads do. So let's go ahead and start this thing up. I do have a little bit of a fuel leak on this thing, so I gotta be quick about this, but let's see what we got here. Sound a lot more. All right, we have fuel dripping on the exhaust, which is not great. I do have to replace the fuel line on this thing, so we'll probably actually go ahead and do that next, but I do have to run out and go buy some fuel line, so I'll probably get back on this thing tomorrow and start with the fuel line. All right, so we just got the new fuel line on underneath here, and the old one right here was definitely pretty bad. You can see how like just rotted out and just dilapidated it was, so I'm glad I replaced it with this new stuff. We finally got the new radiator lines in from eBay after like 2.5 weeks. Kind of took forever, but they're finally here, and I did choose red to kind of go with the color scheme of the quad, so I think it'll make it look pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get these on and then fill up the coolant system and try and bleed all the air out of it. And then after that, we should be able to take this thing out on a test drive. And I'm also probably going to do the break-in off camera on this thing because it does take quite a while, and half of it is just letting the quad idle for like 20-30 minutes at a time, shutting it off, letting it cool down overnight, and it's just a long, boring process. So I'm probably not gonna film it. So after we do the radiator lines, I'm just gonna cut straight to the actual test drive footage. Okay, so we've got all these new coolant lines on, and I've got the whole system filled up with coolant and water, and I have to say that the coolant lines look pretty good with that bright red because it matches the quad pretty well. But something I noticed was there's a little weep hole underneath the water pump here, and I real quick just plugged it with a bolt so it wasn't leaking everywhere because it was leaking. And I did a little bit of research, and I found that what this little hole is for is it actually sits right between the two seals that are on the water pump shaft, because you have the oil seal and the water seal, and those prevent those two fluids from mixing. And what this hole is for is if it's leaking, it tells you if one of those seals is leaking. Because if your oil seal is bad, it will be leaking oil. And then if the water seal is bad, it'll be leaking water. And since it was leaking water, that means I have to replace the water seal in this, which means I have to take this little cover off and replace it. And hopefully I can do it without taking all of the rest of this cover off, because if I do, that's going to be a huge process. I'll have to drain the oil, take off the shifter, the clutch linkage, just all the bolts and everything, and it's just going to be a huge hassle. I will have to drain the coolant that I just put in this thing, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. It has to be done. And I think this could have been a contributing factor to why my coolant and oil were mixing. There could have been some other things, but I think that was definitely something that was wrong. So I do need to fix this to prevent that from happening again. After we do that and get everything back together, I'm also going to go ahead and fix the front brakes before we do the test drive, because I've been really wanting to fix the front brakes on this thing, and I've said in previous other videos that I was going to do it, and I just haven't. So in this video, we're finally going to be fixing the front brakes on this thing, hopefully. I'm at least gonna try. So we're gonna go ahead and get that seal replaced once it gets here from eBay, and then I will fix the front brakes, and then I'll do the new piston break-in period off camera, and then after that we can finally take this thing out for a rip with the new piston in it, because I'm kind of excited to see how much more power this thing has with that high compression piston we put in there. All right, so a bit of a change of plan. I'm actually gonna work on the front brakes right now while I'm waiting on that seal to get here, just so I can kind of be productive and get something done while I'm waiting. So let's go ahead and start working on the front brake system. Alright guys, so I've been working on these brakes right here, and I actually just decided to go ahead and replace the whole front master cylinder, just because, as you can see, the screws are completely stripped out, even though I tried cutting some slots into them for a flathead screwdriver to fit, but I just can't get them out. And this thing's just really old and crusty, so I'm just gonna replace it. But while I'm waiting on that to get here, the new one that is, the seal for the water pump just got here, so let's go ahead and get that replaced. Alright, I got this thing jacked up on its side, so hopefully all the oil will go to the other side of the engine so I don't have to drain it. And I already undid all the bolts on this cover just because it's a long process, and you've seen it before, I think in the last video. So now that we have the bolts off, we can finally take this cover off and replace this seal. Okay, we have no oil, which is good. I forgot I have to take that bolt out. Let me do that real quick. All right, I got that bolt out, so we can take this off now. There was a little bit of coolant dripping out of the side of this thing, which is kind of concerning. And it tells me that seal was definitely bad, so. Wait, seriously? Ha! I didn't even need to take this cover off. Well, that was a massive waste of time. Because if you look right here, this is completely blocked off and I could have just popped it out from the other side. Actually, yeah, it's probably good that I did take this cover off because I may need to get in from behind this thing with this shaft out and yeah, pop it out from the other side. Okay. Yep, looks like I did need to take this cover off. Yeah, I kind of thought there for a second I just wasted a ton of time doing this, but yeah, that seal was definitely bad because I'm actually seeing a little bit of coolant inside of the crankcase here, which is not what you want. So yeah, I think that's definitely why my coolant was mixing with the oil, because that seal was very, very compromised. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this seal replaced and put this back together. So I actually got the complete wrong seal for this thing. I don't even know why I thought this was the right one, because as you can see, they are not even the same type of seal. So I have to reorder it on eBay. So I will turn the camera back on once the new one gets here, because this one just doesn't even fit. It's not even close. So I'll turn the camera back on once I have the new one. All right, so it's the next day and the new master cylinder for the front brakes just got here. So let's go ahead and get this installed while I'm waiting on the water pump seal to get here. All right, so I just got the new brake master cylinder installed and I went to bleed the brakes off camera, but there was a leak in the main brake line. So I ended up having to remove the entire front brake line system and I'm going to replace it. So while we're waiting on the new brake lines to get here, I did get the new seals in for the water pump. So we're gonna go ahead and install these and get this side cover back on and get the whole side of the engine put back together. And then I will turn the camera back on once we have the new brake lines. I'll install those and then I'll probably bleed the brakes off camera, and then we can finally do the break-in on this thing and ride it. So let's go ahead and get these seals done and then I will go from there. All right, so I've already started the break-in procedure on this, but when I did it, I realized my fan wasn't working at all, so I think something is up with the thermostat system. So while we're still waiting on the brake lines to get here, I want to continue with the break-in process on this engine. So instead of using that switch, I'm going to use this switch to wire up right here. I'm actually going to drill a little hole and mount it right here so I can manually control when the fan comes on. And honestly, I'll probably just have the fan running constantly so I can keep this thing cool. So let's go ahead and wire up this switch, drill a hole and mount it so I can continue the break-in procedure. And then once the brake lines get here, which I think should be tomorrow, we should be able to go ahead and hook those up, and then I'll bleed them off camera, and then we should be able to finally take this thing for a ride. All right, so the wire coming out of the fan right here wasn't quite long enough for me to be able to mount this thing in the plastic here, but I think it'll be somewhat protected by these other wires right here. And I think it works pretty well for what we need here. So I'll turn the camera back on once we have the parts for the front brakes. All right, so we finally got the break-in process done on this engine. So it has been a little bit tricky to start because I think somehow there's oil getting into the cylinder. I'm not exactly sure how or why, and it's a little bit concerning. So it's kind of making it hard to start. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing started up off camera because it does take a second, but once it's running, it runs really, really well. So I'm gonna get it started off camera, and then I will start the 360 camera right here, and we're gonna go take this thing up and down the street a few times and really test and see how much power this thing has. this thing's great. It's got really good power, it jumps great. Especially on the landing, the suspension is just so unbelievably soft on this thing. It's awesome. It almost makes me not want to sell it, but I kind of want to move on to something else, and I want a little bit extra cash to play with. So I am going to be selling this thing, unfortunately, because I'm kind of done working on it and just a little bit tired of looking at it sometimes, and I don't really take it out as much as I want to, but I may eventually get a Honda 400EX, just something that's a little bit smaller, because especially for trail riding, this thing is just really big and really tires your arms out trying to steer it all the time. But yeah, this thing's really, really good. It's hard to start, but it runs great once it is running. So yeah, that was a good ride. All right, I think that's gonna be it for this video, guys. We finally got this thing back up and running after lots and lots of work, probably more work than I'd like to admit. But I am going to be selling this, like I mentioned before, because I'm just kind of sick and tired of working on it constantly, and I just want something a little bit smaller, because this quad is very, very large, especially for a guy my size. I mean, I'm like 5'9", 140 pounds, and this thing is meant for some guy who's probably like 6 foot plus, 225 or 250. This is a big man's sport quad. So I definitely want to get a Honda 400EX in the future, just because, like I said, this thing is way too big for me. And this thing is very hard to wheelie compared to other sport quads, just because the front end is just very, very heavy. I mean, you saw me struggling to wheelie this thing. I got a couple good ones, but other than that, it's kind of difficult to wheelie. But it does jump very well. It's got really, really plush suspension. Like the landing, you're like, oh, I just jumped 3 feet in the air and didn't even feel it. That's how good the suspension is on this thing. But yeah, I think we are finally done working on this thing. So this is probably the last you'll see of this quad. I may put out 1 or 2 shorts on it of that ride footage. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment as always. And I will see you in the next video.